Hello, people. All right. In our continued video lectures this week, we are going to be talking about graphics next. You should be able to see our screen here. This PowerPoint is available on our Moodle, and it kind of goes over a lot of what you will read in chapter 12, I believe it is. Yeah, chapter 12. But also kind of I'm going to focus mostly on talking about about ethics in this video and skipping to that. So I'm not going to go over every page of this PowerPoint. So go ahead and feel free to skim through it. But also you want to look at actual chapter 12. And we'll talk about specifically graphics within your draft this weekend and in your final report. Okay. So graphics, when we use the word graphic, this is a definition from our textbook. They're referencing these things: drawing, map, photo, diagram, chart, graph, table, things like that. Okay. For our research report, we use figures and tables. And we'll talk about what those are in a moment. Okay. But essentially, what the point of a graphic is to show relationships between numbers or logic, communicate information in a way that is more understandable in a graphic than it would be in actual text. It can save space. It can be good for people who don't speak English as well, like an international community. It can reduce the amount of text on a page and therefore save space, and then therefore save money if you're doing a lot of printing of these documents. But graphics should have a certain purpose, and so they shouldn't be created just for the fact of being created. And it should be understood. It should be labeled. It needs to be simple. Okay. These are some important reminders when you're creating graphics ethically, and then we'll look at some examples. Cite your sources if you are taking this graphic from another place. You can learn how to do that through your respective citation styles, APA and IEEE. But if it's a graphic that you're creating based off of the research you did, you do not have to cite it like your name 2020 or anything like that. You still have to give it a name and reference it as a figure or a table. Include all relevant data. Don't remove information or data that will, just because it's going to look bad for what you want as the outcome of your research. Okay, you don't have to include all of the information, but you do need to include all of the relevant information. Start at 0. We'll look at an example of how that works. Don't purposefully use a table or a graphic and then put a lot of information into it to kind of hide some bad information. Okay. And that goes with also the design. Don't use color or design to try to misrepresent or hide information. Like putting some bad information in really, really, really small text so you can hardly read it, something like that. Let's look at a couple examples. Let's open this up all the way. All right. So it says, if Bush tax cut expire. Now you can see now it's at 35%, the tax rate. But even before we see the percentages, look at how big it could go up if Bush tax cuts expire, right? So this was during Barack Obama's presidency, and Fox News, which is a conservative leaning news organization, published this or showed this on their news channel. And it looks like it's going to go up, 6 times, right? It's going to be 6 times worse. But you see what the unethical problem here is, that we don't start our axes at 0. Okay. We're starting it at 34, which is unethical, because now actually we're only going from 35% to 39.6. So we're only going up 4.6%. 4.6 is not a lot, right? I mean, it could equal a lot of money for some rich people, of course, but going from that to that looks super drastic, right? This right here is 35%. This right here is 4.6%. So it's not ethical, okay? This one right here. So we have USA Today snapshots. Now, if we look at this, the first thing we see is common injuries children suffer, okay? And what you have to do is when you're creating a graphic, you have to find a way to manipulate your reader's eye in the way that you want it manipulated to see the information you want to see, because we have to be able to see the right things in the right ways. Now, luckily, we're raised in a culture of with Russian readers and Western kind of English speakers. We often go from left to right, top to bottom, right? And so usually we'll start up here and work our way down here. But we also focus on bolded stuff. And so I see common injuries children suffer. I can kind of see that we have like this kid with crutches. And then honestly, I think a lot of people would jump right down here and start reading here. And so we've skipped this. Okay, we'll read that later. We're not reading this stuff yet. And so we see just that thigh bone is 21%, lower leg is 25, upper arm is 17, lower arm is 14. And we think, oh my God, 21% of injuries children suffer are from their thigh bone, 21% are their lower leg, 5% of children suffer spinal injuries. That's kind of scary, right? And so the problem with this graphic is that it's showing this information in a way that could mislead us. Because then right here we read top traumatic orthopedic injuries for which children are hospitalized. So then we realize, well, wait, these are not just common injuries children suffer. These are the top orthopedic injuries, and not just the top orthopedic injuries, but the top orthopedic injuries for which children are hospitalized. So now our data pool of candidates for our percentages here are just children who are hospitalized for orthopedic injuries. And so out of all of the orthopedic injuries, this is the breakdown, right? And so, okay, that makes more sense. Does that make sense? So the information is correct, but the way that it was designed makes people stressed out a lot until they read, because unfortunately we have to deal with how people function and how people read, and we often skip phrases, we often skip instructions, right? When you get a test, you just want to take the test without reading the instructions. And so you want to make sure that you're not doing something like this to make it seem like it's a bigger deal than it is, okay? All right, so here we've got over 100 million people in US now receiving some form of federal welfare. And so we start in 2009, quarter one, and we go to 2011, quarter two. And again, this is a similar problem that we faced before, and this is a common problem that's used, which is why we're looking at it again. It looks like it's going up drastically, right? That it's just like 3 or 4 times worse. But actually, we realize that this problem of not starting at 0 is the same. We're actually, this right here is 97,000, right? And this right here is 11,000. So it is a raise of 11,000, which does mean something, okay? Doesn't mean that this research isn't important, but we can't just start at 0, because then it looks like it's worse than it actually is, okay? Here, the Times leaves the rest behind in print and in online. So over here, we have global visitors of the Times website. 2004, spikes from 0, okay? 2005 and 2006. So these must be like little months right here within each of them. And 0 to 12, we know that it's in millions, right? So these are millions of visitors. So I'm guessing this is like each day or each month they had this many visitors per day. All right. And then here, so this one, this one looks mostly okay, I would say. Global visitors to the Times website. All right. Yeah, 12 million, and then months, years and months. Okay. It's a little bit confusing because I don't know if we're adding every day or if this is just each day. I think it's just each day. Over here, we have the exact same problem, right? Telegraph, they sold this many sales. They had this many sales, full price sales. 446, they had 485. We didn't start at 0. And so actually the Telegraph and the Times are very close. Only 40,000 difference, right? So it's another problem of not starting at 0. Let's look at a couple more examples that are more modern, okay? Let's see. Y'all can't see that, right? Here we go. All right. Coronavirus cases worldwide. So this is on CNN, American News Channel. Breaking news, at least 237 new deaths reported in the U.S. Deadliest day so far. As you can see, it's gotten a lot worse. We had, was it 90,000? I guess 90,000 were reported as getting it yesterday or recently. I guess that's not how many have died, but we've had now 40,000 deaths in the U.S. Unfortunately. Anyways, again, a very common issue is where is the 0 axis? So here we don't even have the 0 showing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing as long as we can imply that this is truly 0. Because if you look here, Italy has 80,500, right? The US has, it looks like slightly more, 80,800. China has 1,000 more, but it looks like they have almost double, right? Maybe not quite double, maybe like a third more, but it's only 1,000 more. And so this is kind of trying to show, oh, look how bad it is in China, right? So that's incorrect. So the design is misleading. Let's look at another example here. This one's interesting. So these are counties within, I believe it was Florida. So within each state in the U.S., we have counties and cities, kind of like you guys have regions and subregions and stuff. We have counties within states and then cities within counties. So the chart below shows impacted counties over the past 15 days and number of cases over time. The table below also represents the number of deaths and hospitalizations in each of the impacted counties. Okay, and so what we have here is we have counties are broken up by colors. Cobb is the purplish one. DeKalb is this turquoise color. Fulton is yellowish. Ginwit is orangish. And Hale is bluish. Now, you want to make sure that you design this well. Make sure the colors you pick kind of make sense together. These colors are fine. I'm not saying anything negative about these colors. But if you had like a bright pink and then like a really mellow blue mixed with like a black and like a pastel orange, that would be weird, right? And so you want to keep it within kind of a similar theme. But as you can see, there's a few issues here. So what they've done is they've the dates here are not chronological. So you would think that if we want to see what's happening with confirmed cases of corona, we'd want it to be chronological to see if it's going up or going down for each county. But here you'll notice that April 26th is our earliest date, I believe. And it's clear over here almost at the end when it should be over here. Okay, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it look like things are going down, right? And in fact, if you notice each of these subcategories right here, notice that the first one is the highest and the one closest is the lowest. Highest, lowest, highest, lowest, highest, lowest. But they rearrange them every time. Okay, so this color is first here, first here, first here, first here, but it's second or third there. It's almost last there, first there, first there, first there, second there, right? Fourth there. So basically whatever the highest number is, they put it first. Basically what they're doing is trying to make it look like it's getting better, right? So they're creating this data unethically to try to actually purposefully confuse people. This is unethical and wrong, okay? And we definitely should not do it. You will lose points for doing this. Whatever result you get is not wrong, okay? If your result in your primary research goes against your secondary research, let me know. In fact, I should probably make a video about it, because it's okay. It's okay if your secondary and primary research don't agree with each other, okay? Okay, so let's jump back here. So let's go back to graphics. All right, so chapter 12 you're required to look at. Now, there are a lot of rules with tables and figures. You're required to include various tables and figures in your IMRaDR report for the draft this weekend. You have to turn in your results section has to have your decision matrix and one other graphic, and your final report does need to have at least a handful of graphics. It kind of depends on your research. They're all going to be in the results section of your report, okay? But there are a lot of rules, and I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, but just realize that for IEEE, there's a lot of specific things, like with a title. If it's IEEE, the title goes above the table but below the figure, but it's different with APA, okay? And so, using Roman numerals versus Arabic numerals in how you decide to name it, where it goes on the page, all of that is going to be dictated in some ways by your citation style, APA or IEEE. I've included some of the basic information in this graphic or in this PowerPoint, but I would recommend going to the actual source, either the Owl of Purdue or the IEEE manual that I've uploaded to our Moodle. Okay. If you're taking information, if you're bringing in a figure or a table from a different source, you need to make sure to cite it, okay, to avoid copyright law as well. Well, so copyright law is actually not the same thing as plagiarism. It's a legal issue, but in order to avoid plagiarism as well as copyright law, make sure you're citing, okay? So we're not going to go into specifics there, but we will look at our example text here. So I am going to be looking at how you design these. Now, if you use Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, they likely have some kind of feature to create graphics for you. If that's the case, great. But do realize that it's still your responsibility that the graphics are created in a way that I can see it, that it's not pixelated, that all of the information that's needs to be included is included. So in some instances, Google doesn't create good graphics. Not always, but in some instances. So just realize that you might have to actually put that work in, okay? For example, we've definitely got a problem here where it looks like it's cut off certain words here. So if he can fix that, great. If not, then it's a problem and we need to fix it in some way. We need to know what your axes are, okay? I need to know what the 1 to 25 is here, okay? Right here, I'm not given that information. 0 to 25 is what? Is that inches of snow? Is that centimeters of snow? Okay, so if you have something like that, we need this right here is a little bit more understandable to me, but you still would want to name it street names, right? Just so we know that these are the names of the streets. And so we do need explanation of your axes in that way, okay? And then, you want to find interesting ways of putting the graphics on the page. As we've seen right here, this is a failure. And then we have a ton of white space right here. Why is there a ton of empty space there, right? And so you want to insert your graphics throughout the results section around the information as you're talking about it, of course. Make sure you're properly highlighting the axes. And then, of course, that they're ethical graphics, okay? Included in there is a decision matrix. Make sure you know the difference between figure and a table. And to learn all the information you need to learn about graphics for our class, you can read chapter 12, which is due this week. Okay, there's a lot of good information. Scan through this. Particularly, I would say take a look at table 12.1 because it'll tell you exactly the purpose of each type of graphic and what the graphic does best, as well as an example of what that graphic looks like in a basic format here. Okay, so that will be helpful for you in figuring out what graphic you could use best. And it breaks it down and explains a lot of good information here about creating graphics, and shows a lot of examples here, gives you tips on how to create them all. All right, so use this. Yes, you need to scan through it and read it, but you don't have to read it in the same way that you would read other chapters because it's a little bit like a dictionary, right? So maybe read the first section of the chapter to get all of that information. And once you get to this part where you have this table that I showed you, you can then scan through and see which ones you want to which ones you want to do, and then go to find that explanation in that section and read about it more. Okay. All right. So I believe I mentioned everything that I need to mention there. One final thing I want to say is that let's go back to our student example here. You will be required to show a couple of your graphics in the results section. And then what you should do is after you have the recommendation section, which we'll talk about later, you'll have your references. Okay, we'll talk about that at another time as well. And then you have appendices. So you'll have a certain amount of appendices. This is Appendix A. That's how they're labeled in APA style. Appendix A, Appendix B. Here, Appendix A was the survey questions, okay? And then Appendix B was the results of the survey that he hadn't included in the results section already, because I do need to see all of your results. So I eventually need all of your results in an appendix section. But if some of your results are already in the results section, you don't have to then include them also in the appendix. He put these into two different sections, Appendix A and Appendix B. For some of you, you might have the question next to the results. And if that's the case, then one section, just Appendix A would be enough, okay? Some of you will have other appendices. If you are translating sources, if you have a source in Russian, like a news article that's local, and you're going to cite a sentence, you can include an appendix with a translation of that paragraph. And then in that way you can cite. And then just so you guys are aware, you can do your survey questions in Russian as well if you're surveying Russians. But I do need a translation as well of that too, okay? Alrighty, I think that's all the information that you guys need on ethical graphics and how to include graphics in your documents. Like I said, make sure you reference IEEE or APA style, and make sure your graphics are done ethically, okay? Put time into how you design them. You will be graded on how effective your graphics are, if they make sense, if they're understandable, if they're necessary, if they help explain information, stuff like that. All right, good luck.